Savio, welcome to the Positive Leadership Academy podcast. So happy to have you here. I know we had a good warm up before we hit record, but here we are, and I guess we're in a way with life. So welcome. I'm so happy that you're here with us.
Thank you, Javier. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to see what this conversation brings to you and your audience.
Great. And I know you are, by looking at your bio, very impressive. So you can give us, when I interview or when I do a podcast with journalists, I always get a little bit intimidating because I'm like, oh, what's up, man? They're gonna interview you, Javier, instead of you interview them. So tell us more about all the magic that you're creating out there.
Sure. So just so that everyone knows a little bit more about me, I'm a keynote and TEDx speaker. As you mentioned, I'm a journalist. At this point, I've interviewed over 2,000 leaders, change makers, and experts, and even celebrities. I'm a board certified wellness coach, also a healthcare leadership strategist, a best-selling author, and the title that life has somehow given me, which is a 2-time cancer survivor. So for me, I know crisis both from studying it and also from living it. And what most people think and feel is that you just need to survive the crisis. But I'm here to tell you that that's not where it's won or lost. It's actually won after the crisis, when you have to recalibrate and figure out next steps forward, because that's when performance is actually being judged and built.
Yes, and that's what caught my eye, and that's what I wanted you to hear, because I grew up in an environment. Obviously, we look at our parents as our first leader, and we get that framework from there. Spoiler alert: that's my second book coming out in 3 months. But I was taught after any type of crisis, you don't talk about it. You don't do that debrief, right? You just move on. Even when my dad passed away, everybody told me, move on. I'm like, oh, yeah, but it was a major crisis. Can we talk about it? And it's so interesting because I did implement the same type of framework when I lead teams in the corporate world in America.
Yeah.
So tell us why it's so important to do that post disruption, that window, and it's so critical.
Sure. So my lane is healthcare leadership. So I work with healthcare leaders, and what most of them actually think, and as you can imagine, is high stakes. It's not only themselves and their organization, it's another human being that they are in care of. And they actually feel like when the pressure hits, it's not really gone, it's just gone quiet, but it's gone internal. And that's where performance is either won or lost. And so for the most part, they actually feel for themselves that they have to put on an armor and put on a facade, lean into just their role, and not really figure out for themselves what are the next step forward after this disruption. What are the ways that you can actually not only self-regulate yourself and allow your team to flourish, but allow your presence and your identity to then inform their next steps? Because you've been in leadership roles. What's a leader? A leader is just someone that individuals want to emulate, want to follow, want to mirror, want to actually, to some degree, be. They actually want to feel not only valued, but they want to feel safe in their roles within the leadership team as well. So post-crisis leadership gap, as I call it, is really that, for example, I'm a 2-time cancer survivor. And so in my recent relapse in 2024 of June, I was in the hospital for 29 days for a stem cell transplant. And in that, I created and I leaned into psychological distancing. This idea that I was in the SHIT, but who is the Savio that's there and what is my problem? So what buffer can I create from where I'm at and where I want to be? And I think when it comes to leadership, we often think that we have to actually fix and resolve the problem. Whereas instead of examining it and figure out what the pitfalls are from that particular situation, we always want to try to fix it. Like you said, we just want to move on from it and say, okay, we survived it and now everything is good and hunky-dory. But that's not where true growth comes from. That's not where true flourishing comes from. That's not where true whatever those expectations are leaned into on you.
Absolutely. And you talk about, congratulations for, being a survivor. I know it's not, tough. It's super tough emotionally, physically, and especially also with the people around you as well, right? It can be devastating for them. And you talk about you're rebuilding your immune system with this stem cell transplant. And then you create this called adaptive resilience leadership framework, right? You created based out of that, right? Can you
Absolutely.
tell us more about that?
Sure. So the framework is really that most leaders wait until they're overwhelmed. The framework identifies the stress signals, the patterns that allow them to convert that particular situation, problem, malady into clarity. Because if you don't identify, you don't name, then you can't actually fix, resolve, and heal. There's just no way. Mine happens to be a medical malady. Of course, I've studied leaders and I speak on keynote stages about this. But at the end of the day, it always comes back down to the human self and what is the motivating factors or non-motivating factors that cause us to change, create, overcome, fix, heal. And so the key element there is really touches upon a TEDx that I did. I did it about a year and a half before my relapse, and it was called 7 Minutes to Wellness, How to Love Your Inner Stranger. And most people say, well, what are you talking about, inner stranger? And I ask a question on the stage and I say, if you see yourself in a mirror, do you see that person reflected back at you? Do you actually recognize that person? And they're like, whoa, whoa. So what's your inner stranger? And I'm like, my inner stranger is that young person who never felt grounded and rooted. I always felt like I kind of didn't belong. I knew people, people knew me. I wasn't bullied. I wasn't an outcast. But a friend actually used to call me nomad. He used to actually say that all the time. And in retrospect, I think I was. And then the person's like, oh, yes, the inner stranger for me is that female, that professional female that I want to be. And I can't seem to get, or that great mother I want to be, or that great sibling I want to be. I just can't seem to grasp at that. And so the framework is really easy. It's called the Aloha Reboot. It's an acronym. As you know, aloha means hello in Hawaiian.
Mhm.
So A stands for acknowledge. So acknowledge where you are. So I tell any leader to that, don't pretend like I was in the hospital and people would come every 4 hours to do vitals. I was attached to all these machines. Acknowledge where you are. Don't pretend, whether that's a word vomit, situational vomit, write it down, type it out. Just be honest with it. L stands for listening. So listen to your inner self. But in Hawaiian, there actually is a healing modality called huna healing. And in huna healing, they believe that you can actually talk to the different body parts, that not only do they sense sensations, but they actually have intelligence, they have consciousness, they actually have something like nonverbal cues for you. And so in huna, they believe you can actually talk to it. I call it the three brains, head, heart, and gut, but you can talk to any organ. Of course, don't do this in front of other people, or you don't have to because they're going to think you're strange if you do this. So that's the L, listening. O stands for opening. So no matter what your belief system is, even if you don't have a belief system, just open yourself up to this. It's just wisdom that's being gained and gleaned from your life experiences in general. And then H stands for harnessing. So harness all this information, make the mental connections and figure out what works, what doesn't work. And then A for aloha means act. So act with intention. But also the caveat is use courage, act with courage, because a lot of this is change, and theory, as you know, really dictates that it's not that people don't want to change. It's that people don't know how to change. They don't know if they're in pre-contemplation, if they're thinking about it, if they're in action, if they are doing it, if they're thinking about relapsing and not doing it anymore. And so really, this is not easy work, but it's 7 minutes to wellness. So 7 minutes. And even if you can't afford to do 7 minutes with yourself, break it down. Take one day and do the A as acknowledge and make that a 1 minute practice. And so that's just really the basic premise of the adaptive resilience framework.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you, because I agree with you in regards to the organs. I remember one time I was in a functional doctor and said, you know what? I feel that your liver is very tight. And I'm like, what do you mean? How can you know if my liver is tight? And I'm like, really? I'm like, are you trying to squeeze me for more money? And she did it was kind of like
Muscle testing.
she hold me
Okay.
and she felt it and I felt it too. It
Wow.
was so interesting. And I can feel the tightness on my organs. So I agree with you 100%, right? I always tell when my stomach is, I'm going through some stress, my God kind of inform me of that as well. So it's very interesting how the organs kind of represent that as well, right? And for you to acknowledge that is great. What I love about your aloha is really recognizing, and I love the open up, right? Really kind of in a way in a Christian faith, we can call it more surrender to what it is, and don't, this is what it is. And there's obviously a higher power as well. I'm curious, I mean, and you interview a lot of leaders and you working with this amazing framework, we can call it. What do you think the leaders are struggling the most when they're going through, when that crisis has passed and they don't acknowledge, hey, there's something going on here that we need to go back and kind of work on it?
Well, they definitely want to push through, but most of it is also the pressure build, the cognitive load, cognitive pressures, but also just the overwhelm of having that responsibility. I mean, we're talking about individuals that, like I said earlier, high stakes. So it's really a life and death situation. But I think overall, among all of it, is this idea of self regulation. You know this to be true. If you're not regulated or do the steps necessary to regulate yourself, whatever that is. So for me, it's meditation. I've been a long time meditator. At this point, I do 20 minutes a day. If I don't do it, I'm totally off. But it could be prayer, could be journaling, could be listening to music,
Mhm.
walking in silence, breathing exercises. There's so many tools that we could do. And now we have AI to help us kind of organize that if we want to. So self-regulation, I would say, is the number one trait. And then the second thing really is this, and I learned this actually, Javier, in the hospital, 29 days, quarantine room, because they have to stave off any infections. This idea of metacognition. What is metacognition? It's the thinking of the thinking. So who's the Savio that's suffering and who's doing the thinking while I'm suffering? Who is
Yeah.
above and beyond that? And I don't like to get too heavy into it because then people get too heady. They get too intellectual about metacognition and all that. But we were told a long time ago that intellect is the number one trait to have. Then we were told, no, emotional intelligence. Yes, but actually the research points to metacognition. It's that specific aspect of what consciousness is happening within said activity, said knowing, said doing. That's really hard. So that's definitely something that has to be unpacked. And lastly, it's really this idea, and a lot of people talk about resilience, and maybe some people used to say I was the poster child of it. But right now in my life and what life has shown me and what my research has shown me and even my lived experience has shown me is this idea of adaptive resilience. That when I was in the throes of that discomfort, that pain, that sorrow, that not knowing, that fear, where can I get the flexibility and the adaptability to figure out strategies to overcome or strategies to make things less painful or less dramatic? And part of it is also this idea of reframing. I didn't look at the chemo as poison. I didn't. I actually saw it as an elixir, as mana from the universe. Because
Yeah.
if I looked at it as poison, then I'm resisting. So like you said earlier, I allowed, I surrendered, I submitted, and I believed in the fact that I don't know what the outcome is, but I believed in the fact that my care team, my body, and myself, beyond the thinking, would allow myself to be able to get the healing that I was looking for. And I will die on this sword, but healing is not linear, because if healing was linear, everybody would be
Will
healed.
be healed. Yeah.
It's not possible.
Yes. And you hit right there. And I always tell myself the suffering, the good suffering, right? Knowing that it's part of the journey, you come out better at the other end. And in my life, I implemented that. I'm like, hey, I know it's not pleasant, but let me tell you, this is gonna make it better. And then when you realize, you're like, man, it's making better. But if you go through it saying, man, why do I have to go through this? You're right. It's like you never get there. You never get to that end that it's get better. I totally agree with you on that. I think the body's so powerful that we need to be welcome in a good way instead of rejecting. And it's everything, right? It's everything that we do, accepted in a good way instead of in a bad way.
And
I'm curious to know, I mean, obviously in the healthcare, yes.
no, I don't want to minimize the fact that these healing medicines are very damaging. They just are. You get side effects, you feel awful, you don't feel great. So I'm not trying to minimize that at all. This is coming from a 2-time cancer survivor. But at the end of the day, if you really think about it, performance doesn't automatically stop after a crisis. It just drifts. And that drift then creates gaps. And that gap then creates these huge fields that you can't recover from. So I think it's important for people to obviously honor what you are going through, but also to see to some degree an objective standpoint as to what is the larger story here. It doesn't always have to be, I know it's controversial to say that cancer is a lesson, but to some degree, everything in our lives is teaching us something, is showing us something. It might suck, but it's showing us something. So it's our decision, and it behooves us to try to figure out how can we make sense of this.
Yes. And I know at the beginning, before we hit record, we were talking. You asked me, you were so candid to ask me about my life. And I think I told you I won't change anything. I will go back and live it again. And I am a true believer that a lot of people, I don't want people to feel sorry for me because I don't need that. Um, I want people to take what they can that can be valuable for them moving on in their lives. But I agree with you 100%. Any everything that happened to me was for a reason. Was it painful? Yes. Did I suffer? Yes. But I'm not going to deny that it was a good lesson that I learned. Unfortunately, it happened, but yeah, but I agree with you 100%. Obviously, we don't want that, but it's just life, right? We need to accept it and say, okay, what is something that I can take out of this?
Especially when it comes to leadership, because in leadership, how does a diamond get formed? It gets formed through pressure. So how can you
Yeah.
gain clarity? You gain clarity, unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't feel right, but you gain it through the pressure. You gain it to the fact that whether you're going to stagnate or make breakthrough. And so that's really the key that I hone on, especially on stages and coaching in general, is the fact that we don't have the answers to it, but it behooves us to actually figure out for ourselves who is running the show here. Where is the operational harmony in how we go about doing things?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I'm curious, I mean, you interview and coach a lot of leaders, especially on the healthcare industry and hospitals. Obviously, the leaders that I know when I started working for Oracle were the leaders that they would do a lot of recreational drugs to
Mhm.
deal with the crisis, a lot of drinking,
Sex.
a lot of yeah, a lot of pornography, a lot of strip joints, a lot of I'm pretty sure the relationship was horrible. Maybe there was other addictions there, but the leaders that you interview, and obviously, yeah, we can call them healthy leaders. How are they dealing with crisis? How they kind of balancing back, learning for what happened, and kind of balancing back in their day to day.
Especially in healthcare, we had a huge right now we have disruptions all over, socially, politically, technologically with AI. But even 5, 6 years ago, we all had COVID. We all went through it, especially healthcare leadership. And to a large part,
Hmm.
it's estimated that at this point, every year, the US wastes about $935 billion in healthcare waste. That's a big deal. That's not just in equipment and in bureaucratic supply. That's human bodies, human leverage that's happening, that's causing the problems, the situations. And so, for the most part, there's numbing that happens. There's all these negative traits like blaming, this idea of obfuscating the truth, and also then figuring out for yourself that you are ineffectual. So there's this idea of imposter syndrome, or not really figuring out for yourself that you're only as good as your least common denominator. This is a saying that people often say, but you're also as good as what you show other people in your wholeness. So if you're able to do some of these things like self-regulate or find some habits that are positive as opposed to the destructive ones, then it sort of balances out each other. I'm someone who doesn't tell people to not do something, because human nature is such that if you tell someone not to do something, they're most likely going to do it. And then who am I to tell you to do something that's not? What I do say to people is you should have guardrails. So is it benefiting you, or is it hurting another person? If it's doing one or the other, then you know that you need to adjust or fix. Because at the end of the day, we don't want to hurt ourselves and we don't want to hurt other people. Every other thing, recreationally, whatever you do, that's based upon your choices. They may or may not help or build you. But at the end of the day, no one can actually take away something away from you, because you're a grown adult and you can make choices based upon that uh, as well.
Yes, exactly. And I love that self-regulating because I think, I mean, I'm pretty sure. I mean, when I see doctors, um, it's kind of interesting. I was paying attention to my family doctor. I wouldn't say her name, but it was like a very robotic experience, and I'm like, oh my god, it's like okay, and I can tell, and I ask her, say, how's it going? Well, what's the highlight of your day? And she goes, well. I am literally 2 hours behind. I'm like, what do you mean 2 hours behind? She goes, yeah, I have appointments stuck up and you waited for me 30 minutes. And I'll go, oh, wow. So that means that instead of you getting out at 5 o'clock, for example, you're getting out at 7. She goes, and I'm like, whoa. And I'm like, when do you breathe? Like, when do you sit down and breathe and really, like you said, self regulate yourself on what is happening? Because it's like you are functioning 24/7 and not really your nervous system is just going, 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 you know, and how you regulating that. And if you do that at the end of the day, that is wow. You know, there's no way you can cool down an electric grid 30 minutes, right? And go to bed, right? So that's gonna take you to bed and then you're gonna wake up and then here you go again, right? So it's so interesting what you're saying. And I encourage people to really pay attention on self-regulating themselves, right?
It's a
Depending on what.
it's a silent burden that they're carrying. They don't want to speak of it because they have roles, they have functions, they have things that need to get done. They also have teams. And so it's completely understandable. One of my favorite shows right now is The Pit on HBO Max. I don't know if you've seen it with Noah Weil. And it's
Yes, my wife watched it. My wife is watching the show, but believe it or not, I mean, I was there for my daughter's birth. I can see blood, but when I see it on TV, I just faint. So I'm like, I cannot watch this. I told my wife, I go, I can't. I'm like, whoa. So you might think I'm taking a nap, but I'm not. I just
no,
fainted.
I'm watching the show, and I'll tell you truthfully, as someone who does these practices, right? This is part of my normal day to day. I have to say it completely disrupts my nervous system. But I watch it, I'll tell you, for three reasons. One, it's entertaining. One, I do like the premise of the show, and I do find it riveting. But three, I actually love the fact that they're showing that there's humans behind these professionals. Because oftentimes, especially when it comes to oncology, you want that oncologist to fix your problem. The biggest
Yes.
mountain is you and death, and you want that oncologist to fix it. But they can't
Yeah.
always fix it. And so I love the fact that they show that these doctors, especially in the ER, are not fine. They're not good.
Yeah.
They're not. And most people think that they will fix you, but they need to fix themselves or they need to actually heal themselves. And so
Exactly.
I just love the reality aspect of that. But at the end of the day, listen, in my healthcare field, they talk about these, terminologies like strategic, reversals and increasing ramp and, figuring out the post-crisis, like, momentum. All those things are wonderful for trade language, that I work with. But at the end of the day, what does it actually mean? It means performance, but performance at what cost?
Exactly. Exactly. And I think sometimes we forget the human aspect of it, right? And I think in people, yes, you might be a doctor, you might have a PhD, but at the end of the day, they're human beings as well. Their feelings don't get changed by you getting a degree, right? You're still living your life as like everybody else. I have a last question for you. Because I can talk to you forever. I mean, I just send my jet, pick you up, and we have dinner tonight. But for the leaders that are listening to us right now, and obviously they're running in fumes, right? And they have a lot of pressure, they have a lot of stress. What is one thing that you can recommend for them they can start doing so they realize, okay, hey, I have power over me. I can regulate this, and I can kind of in a way take control of their lives.
I think it's going to be a very simple visualization that I'm going to give them.
Let's go.
Look at it like a traffic light. So what's on red, what's yellow, and what's green? And
Mm,
allow yourself or visualize yourself in the context of that red, yellow, and green in terms of your particular human function, your operational function, your executive function. Think of
mm,
it like that because, as you know, it never skips to green to yellow. It actually goes in order. There's a function to it. There's a system to it. I think what most people like to do is they like to skip to get to the green always, rather than
yes.
stopping using as opposed to allowing the process to unfold. Because if I
Unfold.
if I wanted, did I want to stay in 29 days in the hospital? Did I want to lose 26 pounds? Did I want to be 4 shades darker? Did I want to take on the chemo? Did I want to do 16 months of recovery, including immunotherapy and also physical therapy? No, I didn't want to do any of that. But that's the process. I always tell people, because I grew up Catholic, but I studied in college various belief systems from now until this point, everything from Buddhism to Jewish mysticism, all the way to Vedic philosophy. And one thing that Eastern philosophy will always talk to you about is this idea of following nature. Nature has a rhythm. The seed never rushes. The seed sprouts roots underneath the ground in darkness and stillness and silence. And also the river knows its direction. If there's a rock or a boulder in front of it, it knows that it needs to go under, over, on the side, on the left. Sometimes it's just still in the water and does nothing, but it has its unique system. It has its unique function. And I think when it comes to leaders in general, I think we are so focused on just figuring out what's happening in the outside world that our internal world is completely silent and dormant. So we need to activate it, reactivate it, and think of it like a traffic signal. And I can always tell people as well, if you're always sort of in the head, which most of us are, I cop to it, I gotten better at it as I got older. Think of it like an elevator shaft. You hit,
Yes.
you're on number 5. Now you're going to go down to number 2. Number 2 is the heart. And then number 1 is, let's say, your gut, and figure out and try to resource that. A lot of this is touchy feely, but a lot of this is very important because in a world where AI can create content, and now we might have robots dictating and telling us to do things or hiring us to do things, I think it's important that we have human to human interaction and confirmation of each other's strengths.
Absolutely. And where can people find you?
Absolutely. They can find me on my website, Savio P Clemente. .com, SAVIOPCLEMENTE.com. On there, they can look at my keynote work. I have a couple of more spots for keynotes. They can look at my TEDx talk. Every Wednesday, I have a Substack newsletter called The Human Resolve, where I talk about head, heart, and gut intelligence, and also my interview series. Right now, I'm running one with CEOs and CMOs on the healthcare leadership operating system. And on social media, I'm at every platform at The Human Resolve, because Javier, as you know, resolve and resolution is the only way forward to freedom.
Absolutely. So happy for you to spend the time with us today, and forward to all the great things that you're doing.
Okay, wonderful, Javier. Thank you so much.